What'd you think of El Camino?
There's a line in the film that I think Gilligan should take to heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's Jesse Plemons. He says, I was thinking about some Easter eggs, but I think I gotta try new paint. This is getting a little tired. It's, I think Vince, he wrote down the script for himself after this. He realizes he needs to move on, but this is the moneymaker for good old Gilligan.
Well, I suppose.
He liked it, and he was good at it.
He was the best there ever was at it. And how do you give up being something that you're the best at?
It's difficult to walk away from that. But now Walter White sounds like this.
His head was looking mighty large.
It looked like he belonged in like a Jimmy Fallon skit or something.
I was thinking he looked like he belonged in some sort of space alien film. He looked like one of the Greys with their large craniums.
Well, El Camino. Rapid thoughts here.
Rapid fire thoughts?
Give me a sentence. It was what?
It was okay. It was rather okay. Do you concur?
I could say that much. I think it was also rather pointless, one might say.
Yeah, maybe. I have to say, when the credits rolled at the end credits appeared on screen, it did feel somewhat pointless. Like, that's it? Okay.
Well, especially when Breaking Bad ended, some people said, what happened to Jesse sort of thing, right? Like there's a lot of people, or some people at least, saying like, oh, maybe he gets in touch with Robert Forster, disappear guy, and ends up going to, I think like even Alaska was mentioned back then by like Badger and Skinny Pete in the car and Felina. So it's like, okay, I guess 6 years later we needed to see that for sure.
Well, I could be wrong. My memory of the show isn't perfect, but when Jesse initially goes to Robert Forster, disappear guy, doesn't he request Alaska, but it's played for laughs, like it's like a joke where it's like, why Alaska? And it's like, I don't know, it sounded good or something. Like it's more a line that is at the expense of Jesse, where it's like he's sort of dumb and hasn't really thought this through and maybe doesn't even realize what Alaska's like, and he just kind of, oh, I don't know, Alaska. But here they give it like a legitimate explanation. He had a heartfelt talk with Mike, and Mike suggested Alaska. And it's like, okay, and the show has done something like that before too, hasn't it? Like,
well, like with Saul and Cinnabon.
yeah, Saul and Cinnabon, or Robert Forster even, where when they first talk about this disappear guy that you can call, and the code word that you have to say when he answers the phone is you have to request this specific model of vacuum. It's like, it was funny because that's like so mundane, It's like, it's this top secret, black market underground thing where this guy's gonna, make you disappear and no one will ever know where you went, but when you call, you talk about a vacuum. It's funny because it's so ordinary and dull, and the contrast between that and the service you're actually requesting. But then it turns out he actually owns a vacuum shop. It's like, okay, I don't know about that.
Well, I know in Felina, I guess maybe they're just expanding on a joke from the episode with the disappear guy where he bailed out on him. And Felina, Badger was like, oh, I thought Jesse was in Alaska or some shit.
Mm.
When he was, surprised at the fact that he was still alive and cooking for the neo-Nazis.
Mm. No, like I said, my memory of the show isn't perfect, but I'm pretty sure Jesse actually said Alaska in the Breaking Bad series. But again, it was played for laughs. And to be clear, I know that they revealed that Robert Forster owned a vacuum shop in Breaking Bad. I'm not saying that was a new revelation in El Camino. It's just an example of how the show takes something that was clearly a joke at the start, and then later on they expand on it, and it takes on some kind of legitimacy or reality. I don't know.
You've only seen a few episodes of Better Call Saul, but I'm caught up on the show, and that's pretty much the entire show, where throwaway lines from Saul throughout Breaking Bad are expanded into, scenes and episodes. Like, there's some joke in Breaking Bad with Saul talking about Kevin Costner and how he convinced some lady that he was him, and
right.
That ends up being an episode.
Yeah, I'd heard about that. Maybe you told me. Yeah, and exactly, that's the sort of thing that's probably not necessary to see. I mean, it didn't even really have to happen. You know what I mean? It could have just been something Saul said to illustrate a point, and it's funny, and so on and so forth. It didn't literally have to be an experience that he had, but I guess it could be too. I mean, why not, right?
Yeah. So the ending, you were thinking maybe it's pointless. Well, how about the beginning and I guess the rest of the film as well? Nothing that blew your socks off?
No, socks remained firmly in place. What about you?
No, same thing. There's a couple moments of, I guess, some intensity and nice shot here and there, but other than that, it just makes you wonder, you know, why was this film even made, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess you're supposed to feel happy for Jesse at the end. You're supposed to view him as a victim, and it's closure for Jesse. He's driving off to Alaska. He's gonna be happy. Good for him. We all like Jesse, and hooray, I guess.
Jesse is a class act. He told the guy, I don't give a shit if you have kids.
Yeah. Well, he's definitely not entirely a victim, that's for sure. I mean, Robert Forster kind of roasts him about it in the movie. It says, like, you kind of made your own bed and
Uh-huh.
or you made your own luck, he says. It's like, yeah, kinda. I mean, maybe he didn't necessarily deserve everything that happened to him, but, you're playing with fire, you gotta expect you might get burnt, right? Like, he's involved in the criminal underworld. But, you do like Jesse. I'm not saying that you can't like him at the same time. But you could have imagined that he drove off and managed to slip away and maybe made a new life for himself somewhere and it was a happy ending for him. You didn't really need a 2-hour movie to get there.
Yeah, I think the final shot with him and Felina kind of communicates that idea, right? Where sort of the liberation of it with him screaming, right?
Yeah,
I guess you could say maybe he didn't get away, but it's sort of like that's the end of his book, sort of thing.
yeah, the important part was that he got away and that him and Walt had kind of a last little moment of reconciliation. They didn't kiss and make up by any means, but Walt didn't have to save Jesse. And I guess Jesse could have shot Walt as well during that stare down they have. But they're both kind of like, there seems to be some mutual understanding before they part ways where it's like, all right, we've been through the shit together and whatever you want to imagine happens after that, you're free to imagine it and just like you can imagine it turned out to be, everything turned out well for him. You don't really need to sit through a 2-hour movie to get there.
Well, if you're gonna make a 2-hour movie 6 years later, where you sort of bring back a lot of these people, right? I don't know. There needs to be like some really emotionally resonant final scene to it, I would think. And maybe some people feel that, right, when he ends up in Alaska and has this little talk with Jane before he had the flashback with Jane. But I was just kind of stone faced. I was like, okay. I kind of just, I was laughing a bit, just like, that's that.
Yeah, as he was driving down the roads of Alaska, let's say, right before the end credits appear, like I wasn't entirely sure that this was the end of the movie, because it wasn't like I was checking the runtime or anything. I got the sense that we were probably nearing the end. But I was like, if this does turn out to be the end, like, it can't just be this, like something is going to happen here. A part of me was even thinking maybe some sort of last minute tragedy was going to occur, like, it's like just something. Something was going to happen, but it's just, oh, he has a clean slate now, and we should be happy for him. It's like, okay, yeah, I guess.
That's also reminiscent of things we've seen in Breaking Bad, where it's like, Robert Forster delivering Walter White into New Hampshire, was it? All snow-ridden. So it's just like, nothing to see here, really.
Yeah, it felt very similar to that, didn't it? I mean, yeah, like you said, he was in New Hampshire, I believe. But, just based on appearances, it looked like almost the same setting. I mean, it was just some snowy, middle of nowhere place. It did kind of feel like a retread of that. Yeah, I think you're on the money when you say that it wasn't all that emotionally resonant. Like it didn't really do much for me. I think it started out well. Well, maybe we should talk about the good, because I think we've talked about a lot of the negative here. What did you like about El Camino?
What did I like? Jesus, that's a tough question. I think the scene in the middle of the film with the two, you first think they're a couple of cops.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out they're not. I think there's some good sort of tension there. I guess it was nice seeing a couple of the old characters who had died. I mean, we could maybe get into that a bit later, talking about each cameo in particular. I mean, the rest of the movie is, I guess some of the stuff with Todd as well is pretty funny, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of him and Jesse on their buddy adventure.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's kind of like, Yeah, what about yourself?
Well, I think it started out well. I liked the Mike scene. I thought it was a fine way to start the film. And, yeah, I liked his little sort of reunion with Badger and Skinny Pete. Maybe some of their dialogue didn't quite land, the banter between Skinny Pete and Badger. It wasn't the funniest we've ever heard from them. It was all right.
Mhm.
But once Jesse gets there and they're sort of, realizing the gravity of the situation, also seeing how Jesse sort of reacts to being back in a normal environment. He's scarfing down the noodles, and when he wakes up, he's not entirely sure where he is, and he's paranoid. And then he's like in the shower, and he has a memory of when they were spraying him down with like a fire hose back when he was being held captive. And I'm like, all right, this is interesting. Like, we're getting to see the effects of his, what do you call it?
Captivity.
Yeah, there you go. We get to see the effects of his captivity. That's, interesting, I suppose.
But then he just drops that act and he becomes, you know, clean, shaven, shaved head, anxious, on the edge Jesse with a gun in his hand, ready to drop some fools and blow up buildings.
Well, I wouldn't have wanted him to act that way the whole film, though, to be honest with you. I wouldn't have wanted, deeply traumatized Jesse, like he's fucking Tom Hardy in Mad Max Fury Road or something, where he barely says a word and he's grunting and... I wouldn't have really wanted that, so I'm not too upset that they kind of dropped that quickly, like he kind of got over it. But yeah, maybe it's not the kind of thing that you can just drop quickly at your convenience.
So what do you think about all the use of flashback throughout the film? It almost felt like a half prequel, half sequel.
Yeah, I think the flashbacks with Todd were probably the best part of the whole movie. You get to see the strange relationship that the two of them had
Sure.
when the family's away for the weekend, and it's just Todd and Jesse, and they get to pal around. It's yeah, that was probably the best part of the film. Not that it was vital information that justified making this film by any stretch, but it gave you some insight into what it was like for Jesse while he was being held captive, because the actual Breaking Bad series kind of glossed over that. He almost faded into the background. He was almost like he was a very minor part of that final season of Breaking Bad, which seemed odd, given that he's like the co-lead of the whole series. So it was like, all right, we're getting some insight into what it was like for him. I mean, even that wasn't terribly interesting, though, outside of the Todd stuff. Like, when you see him with the other neo-Nazi guy, and they have him chained up to, like, the zip line, or whatever you want to call it, and they're kind of abusing him, making him hurt himself by seeing if he can break free. It's like, I don't really care about this. Like, I guess it's like, poor Jesse, he had it so bad, like,
I want to see him go flying in that scene to justify its existence in this damn movie.
It's like, we know he had it bad, you know what I mean?
Also, some of the stuff with Todd ties into the film, like, in a tangible way, in terms of, like, him looking for his money in this location. It sets up that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Where he starts, approaching that location, and you don't know why he's going there exactly. It's, going back and forth with the flashbacks in present day.
Yeah, that's a good point. But at least Todd and Jesse had an interesting, like, relationship dynamic that was fun to watch, and also kind of disturbing in its own right as well. Like, the way that Todd treats Jesse like he's a buddy, but he really isn't, And, like, Jesse is only going along with this because he has no choice whatsoever in the matter.
What kind of pizza do you like? Pepperoni?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, you're at this guy's mercy, and you're generally treated so terribly that in some sick way, you probably actually start to appreciate, like, the little favors that they start to show you here and there. It was interesting, and Todd is a pretty, intriguing character, and there's, some humor that comes out of this, strangeness of his character. But, yeah, I mean, that was probably the best stuff in the film.
Jesse Plemons was looking a little heavy.
Just a little?
I read some interview with him a couple months ago where the interviewer was asking him, how do you gain this weight for these roles and then manage to lose it for another role or something? He's like, if I want to gain weight, I eat a lot. If I want to lose, I stop eating as much. It's not really that hard. But I guess he didn't stop eating for Breaking Bad.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, losing weight. I don't think he actually does the losing weight part. I don't know where the journalist is getting that.
I think there's like a certain movie where he was even heavier than this or something.
Well, it's been a while, Breaking Bad was, what, six years ago? So all of these actors have aged 6 years, even though a lot of the flashbacks take place during the show.
Could we speak about Walter White's cameo for a bit?
Sure. What do you think about Walter White's cameo?
Well, at first he appears, right, walking down the halls of the hotel.
Yeah.
And is that, like, supposed to be, like, a badass hooray moment? Or, like, a comedy gag? Like, what is it?
It's a reveal. I mean, at the very least, I can say that it's a reveal. So you're supposed to get some sort of reaction out of it. When, oh my God, there's Walter White. supposed to feel some kind of way.
But was you and I laughing for 10 seconds straight the reaction that Gilligan had in mind?
Probably not, although it depends on why we were laughing, perhaps. I can't really speak for you. I'm not sure why you were laughing.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, because sometimes if something really badass happens, you can, at least I've done it, I'll start, like in a movie or something. Something badass happens. You might start laughing, but not because you're laughing at it because you think it's silly or something along those lines, but that's just the reaction that happens for whatever reason.
Well, he showed up and he was looking silly, first of all. And then he kind of just keeps walking for like, multiple seconds. And then it's sort of like, is Gilligan like controlling people who want a Cranston cameo in here or something? Which, obviously not the case since he has a scene with him that's a few minutes long and pretty average at best.
Yeah, so it was a reveal, and was it supposed to be badass? Maybe, because there is that sort of extended shot of them walking down the hallway, and it's almost like a Reservoir Dogs shot or something, where they're badass guys, they're walking, getting down to business, this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're mean mugs for the camera.
Well, his shaved head or whatever was looking absolutely ridiculous.
Well, it was, yeah. It's pretty clear that he didn't actually want to shave his head, or maybe had another project going on and couldn't shave his head, so they had to stuff it under a bald cap. And yeah, if you're someone who's watched a lot of Breaking Bad and you're very used to seeing what he looks like with a legitimately bald head, you know that this ain't it.
Well, it was just like distracting the whole time. Like I was saying, it looks like some sort of bald cap that he would wear on when he's doing like a skit for Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel or something, And like also his voice, there was like a certain quality that it was off. I don't know, maybe that's how he sounded when he was, really sick and coughing all the time back in, season 2 or whenever this scene was supposed to take place. But it was, the whole thing seemed off with Cranston, which was a bit disappointing.
Well, the bald cap was weird, but I guess you just kind of have to go with it. I mean, what can you do? But it is what it is. But I will say that during the scene where Walt and Jesse are sitting down to breakfast or whatever it is, there's the part where Walt tells Jesse, there's nothing stopping you from going to college. You just have to get your GED first. And, it turns out he did graduate high school, and Jesse's offended that Walt assumed that he was a dropout and all this kind of stuff. That was supposed to be funny. You were supposed to get a laugh out of that. But something about it was off. Like you were saying that the scene felt off. Like, had that scene actually been in, like, season 2 or season 3, it probably would have been funny. But something about the execution of it here, I don't know if it's partially because, like, current day Aaron Paul can't really convincingly play, like, the really stupid season 2 Jesse anymore. I don't know if it's that, or just something about the timing of it, or the emotional tone of the scene. It just doesn't hit the right note, in my opinion, where it wasn't as funny as I think they wanted it to be, or as funny as it could have been.
Then that scene closes with that other line where he says something like, you don't gotta wait your whole life to do something special, which I don't know if that's really like something he would say back then in season 2. That seems like a later season type thing.
Well, when was that supposed to take place exactly?
It only has the shaved head and the mustache, right? So that's either late season 1 well, Jane is also, he was probably calling Jane on the phone, I imagine, Jesse, in the hotel room.
Yeah.
So I guess mid-season 2.
Right, I suppose, because he says they have a stash. They have like a whole bunch of meth that's worth like $1.3 million or something. When did they have that again? What would that be a reference to? Would it be after
I guess sometime in
the episode 4 Days Out, when they do all that cooking?
Yeah, that seems right.
After they get out of that jam in the desert that they were in the episode 4 Days Out, maybe they stopped at a hotel because they were stranded out there in the heat for like days.
Other cameos. Mike, you said you liked Mike's little cameo in the beginning?
Yeah, sure, it was fine. It was a comfortable way to start the show, I think.
We're starting the show now?
Show, movie, whatever. It basically was some extended episode of the show.
Better Call Saul webisode is better. So we had Mike, right, Jesse's parents, who gives a shit about them.
Right.
There was sort of a reference to Lydia. They mentioned some lady dying in connection with Walt.
Yeah, they confirm, which again didn't really need confirming, that she's gonna die. They say, oh, doesn't look like she's gonna survive. It's like, okay. But aside from that, I think the purpose of the scene was, I think the first time Jesse was learning for like a 100% fact that Walt was dead. Because when they part ways, he knows Walt is shot and bleeding, but he doesn't necessarily know one way or the other what happens to him for sure. But in that scene, he hears on the radio that, the infamous Heisenberg who was dead at the scene or whatever.
Well, probably better for him. One less person to possibly testify against you if you get caught.
I guess that was a nice little scene. Aaron Paul doesn't it's not melodramatic. He doesn't, break down in tears or anything, but you could see that he's somewhat bothered by the news that Walt is dead. But obviously his character is going to have conflicted feelings about it anyway. Doesn't exactly love Walt by that point.
Other little references that you spotted, anything? That one guy, the junkyard car guy, where he's going on and on about magnets.
Right, yeah.
Oh, I love that line. That was pretty silly.
It's too self-referential. It's like only someone who watched the show and knows that the magnets thing was like a meme and a line that the fans fell in love with. Would the guy really remember that? Would that stick out in his memory so much? This kid yelled magnets. It's clearly just a reference to the meme.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't think the character would actually say that.
Sure. Well, that character first appears in the movie, and he's sort of a little giddy to help them, which I thought was odd, but I kind of liked how they set it up in that way. So then by the end of the scene, he's like, oh, see you later, I'm out of here. It's like a complete 180 turn that he took.
Yeah, well, they throw in some line about how Walt and Jesse and all of them did a lot of business with him, so he has some fondness for them. I guess they probably paid him well for his services. He made a lot of money off of them, so he's happy to help. And speaking of references, there's a sort of a reference in that scene as well, beyond what you said about the magnets. He discovers that there's a low jack on the car. It's when Hank is trying to track down Jesse, I think in season 1? No, season 2. Hank is trying to track down Jesse in season 2, and he manages to trace him back to Tuco's place. There's a quick line in the show about how Jesse's car has a low jack on it, and that's how he managed to pinpoint the location of Jesse's car.
Mm-hmm. In Todd's apartment, there's a Vominos Pest t-shirt randomly on the floor. Gotta get that in.
Okay. Well.
Nice little Easter egg for the clickbaiters. Top 20 things you didn't notice.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Of course, you got the tarantula.
The tarantula is an obvious one. Which I didn't mind, to be honest with you. I'm not against any and all references or Easter eggs.
Sure.
If they make sense or whatever the case may be, I can go with it. It's when it feels too fan servicey that I start to get annoyed by it. The magnets thing was kind of really riding the line, where it didn't annoy me too much, but it was just, on the border of feeling way too fan servicey.
Oh, well, let me tell you one thing. Good thing Brock didn't show up in this film.
Oh God, that would have been sickening. Well, even, I'm glad you mentioned Brock, actually. I'm glad you mentioned Brock, because there's the part where you realize Jesse's sending him a letter.
Mm.
So then, yeah, you see the close-up of the envelope and it has Brock's name on it. But, I don't know. Isn't that a big load of horse shit, though?
What, just Brock being in the final scene, like a letter for him?
The idea that Jesse would think it was worth sending a letter to the kid, or that it made any sense to send a letter to the kid. How much time did you really spend in this kid's life? And he was, 6 years old or something like that? Does the kid really... is he that attached to you to the point where you're going to try to keep up some sort of correspondence with him? I mean, you are, kind of a degenerate... you're like a degenerate felon fugitive who's all over the news. I mean, I don't know. It might be best to just let it go. And
he shows the letter to his classmates in the 4th grade. Hey, teacher.
You know what I'm saying, though?
No, I get it, yeah.
Does Brock really need Jesse in his life anymore at this point? Was Jesse that important to him to begin with?
He was a wonderful father figure.
I just feel like Jesse should have the sense to say, it's fine if he still cares about Brock in some way and he has fond memories of Brock, but to think that he needs to inject himself into Brock's life at this point, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's the only person he really still cares about, sort of thing, when his mother is gone, right? She got whacked. So it's maybe help out this kid who doesn't have much help.
Yeah. Well, how's he helping him out anyway? Jesse doesn't have any money. He doesn't have anything.
Yeah, maybe, he flips burgers in Alaska and sends half his wage to Brock.
Maybe. It seems slightly forced to me. I just feel like that's something Jesse would not only he would have to let go of it. It's almost like he doesn't even have a choice. You kind of just have to leave your old life behind at this point. But he should also have the sense to say to himself that it's just not worth it anymore. That ship has sailed.
Other cameos or references? I was going to mention something that I can't remember now. Oh, yeah. Jesse sees, the red van that Robert Forster has. Good thing he mentions it, because he's staring at it, and I'm like, why is he even looking at that car?
Okay, see, I picked up on that right away. Jesse with a bug crawling on his hand. That's a reference that happened before.
The explosion reminded me of Walt walking away from blowing up Ken's car. I know you're furious over that 6 years ago.
Furious? I don't remember that.
He said, "Come on, that's some lame action movie shit."
Well, it is sort of lame action movie shit. It's like out of a Robert Rodriguez movie.
I think actually we watched that episode together. We're watching a show for the first time. You know, that scene closes out the episode, probably the third or fourth episode. You start complaining about it, but then next thing you know, you watch the rest of the series for that movie.
Hey, look, Hurricane Sandy happened, I think. I was feeling depressed. I needed Breaking Bad to cheer me up. It was something that kept me going during hard times. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Well, the explosion was stupid, and not just because it was a dumb action movie, Robert Rodriguez movie kind of thing, but, you were supposed to think it was badass, but why, what was the point of it? Like, why did Jesse need to, maybe to cover up the fact that the man was shot? They'll think he just died in some accidental explosion. They'd be able to determine that he was shot anyway, I'm sure, once they do an autopsy or whatever.
Yeah, maybe just blow it up. You know, no one in this terrible company is gonna, keep providing their service. The sketchy people.
Well, I don't know. I think it's supposed to be badass. Maybe he's supposed to be covering his tracks, make it look like the guy wasn't murdered, even though they're gonna suspect foul play anyway and look into it. But it's also just like he's really drawing a lot of attention to himself for a guy who's a fugitive on the run. That kept crossing my mind throughout a lot of the movie. Like, he's returning to Todd's apartment. Like, that seems like a really sketchy maneuver.
He's taking Gus Fring's advice, hiding in plain sight.
I mean, I guess as the story progresses, it becomes somewhat clear that maybe it's worth taking all these chances, because he's trying to gather money for the disappear guy. Maybe he figures he can't try to cross state lines on his own. He's just going to get busted. He's taking a risk in a lot of ways, because one, he's kind of returning to, let's call it a hot spot, where it's very likely that there's going to be police activity, and he's likely to draw attention to himself by going to a place like Todd's apartment. But it's like he's going there and he doesn't even know for sure that the money is still there. Maybe the police found it. And even if the money is there, he doesn't know exactly where it is. So he's just got to rummage around the apartment for some indefinite amount of time, tearing things down and making all sorts of noise. I mean, he had to be making a hell of a racket in there.
All that is glossed over with the classic Breaking Bad style editing.
Well, I'm just saying he's taking a huge risk, and there were a lot of variables that...
Oh, sure, but you gotta be taking high risks for high rewards, big cash.
It might have, but was the risk worth it, though? Like, would it have been less risky to just try to go across state lines? Or was it less risky to go back to a crime scene and rummage around for 8 hours and make a racket and so on and so forth?
I like the scene with the, well, maybe I didn't actually like it now that I think about it. But... like the Western duel, and he has a second gun in his pocket.
I liked the reveal that it was all like he had a plan, and he shoots him with the other gun that he has hidden in his pocket. You kind of forget about that other gun by that point, and it was smart. It was a clever reveal. I have to say though, it really felt like Gilligan always wanted to make a Western. It's like, this is as close as I'll ever get, so let me force some Western-esque scenario and cinematography into a scene so I can get that out of my system. But I don't know if it really fit, per se, but I did like the reveal.
Leone close-up of the eyes.
Yeah, the Leone close-up of the eyes. There was also, like, the close-up of, like, the hand next to the holstered gun from, like, the waist down.
Mm-hmm. Was Jesse honestly expecting the guy to give him 1,800? Figured it was worth a chance, and if not, he has 2 weapons on him.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting that you say that, because Jesse clearly makes an effort to conceal one of the guns. But it's like he didn't walk in there knowing that he was going to be challenged to a duel. But, maybe that would have came in handy anyway. Catch the guy by surprise.
You don't want to reveal all your cards. You don't want to have both guns in the front. Then the other guy grabs a gun and starts shooting him, and they fire a good 20 bullets each with total misses. It was like Todd in that one episode of 5B where he's shooting into the air, knocking out some pigeons.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Jesse, he should have expected that the other guys in the room might attempt something, but he's just kind of standing there like an idiot until the guy literally grabs the gun and has turned around and started firing on him. It's like only then Jesse starts reacting. Probably should have anticipated that someone else might try to make a move. Like, it was pretty goddamn lucky he got out of there.
The one guy in the apartment complex, the old man, constantly bugging the 2 guys.
Yeah, he was a funny character.
Oh, you know what I wanted to mention, actually? I was thinking, with all these, flashbacks and stuff, to, stuff that happened during 5B, I think we should have just got a Walter White movie where he's in hiding in New Hampshire.
Yeah, that could have been interesting.
Because that's what season 5B was missing, and I think I can speak for you, both of our eyes, right? More of a Walt in hiding sort of thing. It just kind of just glossed over in an episode and a half.
Well, there were a lot of things that felt rushed about that final season, and yeah, that was one aspect.
We're gonna air our grievances on 5B. This is our platform. Well, maybe speaking about Jesse and 5B specifically, maybe is a good idea.
Yeah, he kind of just becomes a minor player in the final season, which really threw me for a loop.
Well, they also make his character pretty unlikable, right? Where he's always just like yelling and, oh, Mr. White's the devil, and all that sort of jazz.
Yeah, he's very traumatized throughout that final season. A lot of crying, a lot of guilty conscience stuff, which is, well, whatever. Like, I guess someone in his shoes could feel that way. But you don't get much out of Jesse in that final season, other than in the beginning of it, he's sad and crying and traumatized all the time. Then he gets locked up and kept in captivity, and then it's like the show nearly forgets about him. What do you get? A couple of scenes where he's crying in his cell or something along those lines?
That's 5B, everybody.
Well, we're all over the place here with this discussion. I don't even know if there's that much to say about this, really. It was very middle of the road for me.
Well, that's the thing, is like you can't really hate it, right? But you, like, all these years pass, they make a movie and it's kind of like, if that's your reaction, like, it's not even really worth making. I mean, I guess, good. It's good for the cast, right? They're making money, and Gilligan is doing well, I guess.
Yeah, you just can't shake the feeling that it didn't really add much to the proceedings.
Well, it was good for Robert Forster, too. He was in the two best movies the past few years. El Camino and the other great movie, Twin Peaks: The Return.
A masterpiece movie in 18 chapters. And Robert Forster was a part of history by being in that.
When the evil Coop shoots him and his hat goes flying in the air.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't Twin Peaks: The Return level bad by any stretch. It wasn't even bad. It wasn't bad. It kind of just...
But there was like almost no way where it was going to be great. I mean, I guess it could have been, but it's like you have a 2-hour movie after all these years. It's like, how much could he possibly even fit into that? Especially with this story, going into it. We're like, what are they going to possibly do with this? So it was just sort of puzzling from the get-go.
Yeah, I have to say, when it started, as the film progressed, and I realized that it was leaning fairly heavily on flashbacks, and that it was also incorporating elements from the series into the narrative. Like, Robert Forster, the disappear guy, is back, and Jesse's going to use him to go into hiding and run from the law. And, like, I guess it makes sense, right? But I had no clue where this movie was going to go before we watched it. I mean, when it's like, oh, they're making El Camino, it's a Breaking Bad movie, it tells you a Jesse story after the events of the series. Like, the most I could figure was that, okay, it's going to be about Jesse running from the law and trying to escape and go into hiding. That's all I could really assume about it. And I kind of figured, well, I guess they're free to do like anything they want with this. It could go anywhere. Like, it's a big question mark. But then it turns out that it's like very dependent on flashbacks, and these, the flashbacks are stuff that took place during the Breaking Bad series, and then the current day stuff is like, oh, the disappear guy and Badger and Skinny Pete, and here's Mike to tell him to go to Alaska, and it's like...
It shouldn't even be dependent on some of the flashbacks. Like, the Mike scene is good, but like that and the Walt scene, it's just like, it's not needed for the narrative of the film. It's just sort of just there to, let's include these characters.
Well, the Mike thing is there to give some...
Sure, the Mike, I'll give you that much.
I mean, it's probably not necessary. But as it stands, it's like, all right, it's a nice... You get Mike back in there, it's a decent little scene. It adds a little bit of depth to the proceedings, I guess. It's fine. I'm fine with that, I guess. But maybe the Walt scene is just there to kind of give the characters like a more tender moment. They have a more tender scene between the two of them, because like the last time we saw them, they were kind of at each other's throats and kind of hated one another. And so here's a nice little scene between the two of them where you get, like a sort of a glimpse into the fact that maybe Walt, cared about Jesse. He's trying to give him life advice or whatever. I guess that's why that's there.
Didn't we have something like that in 5B as well? Like a tender flashback season 1 with them in the RV.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's like, okay.
One of the 5B episodes starts with them in the RV.
And that was like the first time they probably had like current day Aaron Paul try to play like season 1 Aaron Paul. Doesn't work at all. Yeah, so I guess there was that, but I don't know what I'm trying to say other than that I didn't expect it to lean so heavily on like Breaking Bad lore, I guess.
No, I'm there with you. I was expecting a lot of sort of not relying on flashbacks, right? And it's centered on Paul sort of escaping the authorities.
Right.
Like a lot of scenes where he's creeping around and driving and et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
And also they have like the story with him getting the revenge on those guys who he blows up their place. It's like, do we care about his revenge against these people? Like, Walt killed all the neo-Nazis that were, forcing him to cook. So it was just like, it felt like another retread.
Yeah, I felt like they needed to throw in another set of antagonists. Because we definitely don't care about him getting any kind of revenge, because we've never even seen these characters until this movie. Like, they try to work it in that the one guy was involved in past events, but you never actually saw him in Breaking Bad. Now, maybe he was in there for a minute, but he wasn't anybody that you'll remember, and he's nobody important. And it wasn't even so much revenge that Jesse was taking, it was just more like, I don't know, he needed to confront them in order to get his money. But you probably didn't need that type of a conflict in the movie. Like you said, I thought that it was going to basically center around Jesse trying to evade the law and find some sort of way out, and the various twists and turns that would take on.
Maybe some other party, comes along the way and chases him as well. It's like a toned down Mad Max road movie I was expecting.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what to expect. Like I said earlier, when I first heard about this movie, it just, other than Jesse has to evade the law, I really had no clue what the details would be. It was basically a question mark. And yeah, I just didn't expect it to be like, here's the disappear guy again, and here's, he has to go back and get Todd's money. I figured all this stuff was in the past, and Jesse's on the run, and we're going to get something that's more of an original story that doesn't have so much Breaking Bad stuff in it.
Well, even then, it's like the same stuff you're experiencing, where like Robert Forster, right? He's very serious about what he does, and he's very precise, and he's not gonna let his guard down for Jesse or for Walt or anybody else. It's like, okay, got it. All right, let's take him to a snowy place. Okay, he's in the back of the truck. Isn't that cool? Make sure you lay low. 40 miles down is the stores.
He's wearing an exquisite sweater.
Yeah. I said that's the type of sweater you would see Aaron Paul wear at some Hollywood party.
MTV Movie Awards.
Well, he's right now he's getting a suit ready for the Oscars, only for him to lose.
They're not even going to invite him in.
But I'm sure the movie will get some sort of nomination.
You think so?
Something. Cinematography or something, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe. Perhaps. It's fine, it's fine. That's all I can really say about it. It's fine.
And what more could you want out of a movie that follows the most iconic TV show of all time?
I didn't know this was based on The Wire.
Good old Gilligan. I was watching an interview with him a few days ago where it was like promoting El Camino, and they asked him, are we going to get a sequel to this? He's like, never say never, but I think it's time for me to try new things for once.
But in the meantime, I'll be going back to Better Call Saul.
Well, he's barely even working on that. In the interview, he was like, they're doing everything. I directed one episode from this new season, but other than that, I'm hands off. I'm a director for hire.
I'm actually slightly surprised that there was no Saul appearance anywhere.
Yeah, he got mentioned. One of the teasers, for the first promotional teasers, was Skinny Pete being interrogated, and then never showed up in the film.
Yeah, I had a feeling that wasn't going to be in the film. I forget who I was talking to, I guess it wasn't you, but I remember saying to someone, like, that might not even appear in the film.
Yeah, any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts? I mean, no. Nothing really. I mean, well, what else is there to say about this big pile of shit? There's not much more you can say about it. It's okay.